My life before it felt like a goddamn movie. A carefully constructed narrative, meticulously edited for public consumption. I was Damon Hayes, 34 financial analyst, the guy who climbed the ladder rung by agonizing rung. My dad busted his back on the factory floor. Mom slung coffee at the local diner. College wasn't a given. It was a freaking war we waged against poverty. I earned every goddamn scholarship, worked every greasy spoon shift, crammed every late-night study session, landed the job, the life. And then there was Serafina. My Serafina. Even the name sounds like something out of a fairy tale, doesn't it? Serafina, 32, was everything I wasn't. Effortlessly chic. Blonde, sculptured cheekbones, a smile that could melt glaciers. Marketing executive for a high-end fashion house. She moved in circles I only read about in magazines. We met at a friend's summer party. I was instantly, irrevocably hooked. A year later, I proposed. Vineyard wedding, $10,000 dress. 150 guests, most of whom I barely knew. My dad, bless his blue-collar heart, pulled me aside during the reception, reeking of cheap whiskey and honest concern. Son, he'd slurred, "You sure about this one? Seems kinda delicate. God, if he only knew." I laughed it off, patted him on the back. He just didn't understand modern women. I told myself that anyway. The truth is, even back then, the flags were fluttering like banners in a hurricane. The way her smile tightened when I talked about budgeting, the barely veiled contempt she held for my family's simple lives, the glazed-over look she gave me when I tried to vent about work, followed by a detailed monologue about office politics and the injustice of not getting the corner office. But I was in love, or at least, I thought I was. We had the McMansion with the granite countertops she insisted on, the annual trips to the Caribbean where she'd spend hours posing for Instagram, while I just wanted to drink a beer and read a goddamn book. The curated social media presence, #blessed, #perfect life, #couple goals. I worked out religiously. Always had. A relic from my high school football days. I needed that outlet. Therapy after the rat race. 5 a.m. workouts, even during the week. "Why do you even do that?" Serafina would mumble, her voice thick with sleep. "It's just weights. She didn't get it. She never tried to get it. The sex had become predictable. Infrequent. More of an obligation than a desire. And the conversations? Dwindling. She was more interested in her phone than my day. But that was normal, right? Just marriage. I excused it. I always excused it. The cracks were there. Hairline fractures in the foundation of our picture-perfect life. I just didn't want to see them. I was too invested in the illusion. Then came the storm. Busy season at work. 60-hour weeks. Drowning in spreadsheets. Analyzing portfolios for the firm's biggest clients. The promotion was dangling like a carrot. Less grind, more power, more money. Serafina was, predictably, unimpressed. So, more late nights? Fantastic. Her voice dripped sarcasm. 3 weeks into this hellish schedule, my body started to unravel. Exhaustion so profound, it felt like my bones were filled with lead. Aching muscles that screamed even after a pathetic attempt at a workout. A persistent throbbing headache that Advil couldn't touch. Chills that ran through me despite the summer heat. "Maybe you should see a doctor," I mumbled one evening, barely able to keep my eyes open during dinner. Serafina didn't even look up from her phone. You always find an excuse to get out of going to parties with my friends. Just take something and deal with it. Maybe if you weren't at the gym every morning, you wouldn't be so tired. Classic Serafina. Turning it back on me. The subtle dig about my obsession with the gym. Always chipping away. I pushed through. Another week of hell. I could barely make it through half a workout. My colleagues started giving me worried glances. Sweating in the air-conditioned office. My boss even pulled me aside. "Damon, you okay? You look like hell." "Just a bug," I said, forcing a smile. "Nothing serious." Liar. I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. Then the fever hit. Not just a mild rise in temperature, but a raging inferno in my skull. I woke up drenched, shivering, every joint screaming in protest. My head felt like it was going to explode. 102.3. Not ER worthy, but definitely doctor worthy. Serafina's response? Just sleep in the guest room then. I have a presentation tomorrow and can't risk getting sick. There's soup in the pantry if you want it. That was it. No offer to check on me. No offer to make the soup. I could hear her later that night, laughing on the phone with her friend, while I was shivering under a pile of blankets, too weak to even stand up. I called the doctor's office in the morning. Earliest appointment? Next week. The nurse suggested urgent care if things got worse. I decided to tough it out through the weekend. The biggest mistake of my life. 3:00 a.m. Sunday. I woke up paralyzed. Or, at least, that's what it felt like. My right arm was heavy, numb, unresponsive. My right leg wouldn't cooperate. The room was spinning, and my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I tried to stand, to make it to the bathroom. Collapsed halfway there, knocking over the bedside table. The crash jolted Serafina awake. She appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame, arms crossed. No rush to help. No concern in her eyes. Just irritation. Seriously, Damon? It's the middle of the night. I was on the floor, struggling to breathe, my speech slurring. Something's really wrong. Can't feel my arm. Room spinning. She sighed. A dramatic, theatrical sigh that could have won an Oscar. I'm not your mother, Damon. Handle it yourself. I have that client meeting at 9:00 a.m. and need my sleep. She turned and walked back to bed, closing the door behind her. I lay there, helpless, for what felt like an eternity. Finally, I managed to drag myself back to bed, grab my phone. My fingers wouldn't work properly. Used voice commands to call my brother, Liam. He lived across town, but he was there in 20 minutes. His face, when he saw me, said it all. This wasn't just a flu. This was serious. Jesus Christ, Damon, he said, helping me sit up. Why didn't you call an ambulance? I mumbled something about insurance, about the cost. Liam didn't argue. He lifted me up, practically carrying me to his car. Serafina didn't even come out of the bedroom. Liam left her a note, taking Damon to Memorial Hospital ER. The ER was a goddamn zoo. Saturday night spills into Sunday morning. Fights, drunks, car wrecks. But the triage nurse took one look at me and called for a wheelchair. My fever was spiking, blood pressure plummeting. I was losing consciousness. Things happened fast. Blood draws. Fourth lines. Doctors firing questions at Liam. Septic shock. Kidney distress. A neurologist. Liam called Serafina again. She'd finally read his note. Texted him, "What's going on?" he told her. I was seriously ill, possibly septic. Being moved to the ICU. Her response? Which hospital? She showed up an hour later. Yoga pants. Full makeup. Looking like she'd been dragged away from something important. I was hooked up to machines. A central line being inserted into my neck. Couldn't you have picked a worse time for this? She muttered, not even looking at me. I have that campaign launching tomorrow. The ICU nurse, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, stared at Serafina like she was from another planet. Ma'am, your husband is critically ill. His infection has gone septic. He's going to be here for a while. Serafina looked put out. She sat in the corner, pulled out her phone, and started scrolling through Instagram. While doctors explained that I had a severe bacterial infection that was attacking my organs, she was liking vacation photos and commenting on someone's new shoes. I have to go, she finally said, grabbing her purse. Didn't even come closer to my bed. I'll check in tomorrow. Try not to be so dramatic with the doctors. They're busy people. Liam was livid. Are you kidding me? He could die, and you're worried about a marketing campaign? I was too sick to process it. The infection was a sledgehammer to my body. My organs were shutting down. The doctors later told me my lactate levels were off the charts. I drifted in and out of consciousness for the next 2 days. Liam stayed as much as they'd let him, talking to doctors, calling our parents. Serafina visited once. 15 minutes. complained about the parking and the questions the nurses asked. She didn't touch me, didn't hold my hand. No sign of concern. She did, however, take a selfie in the ICU waiting room, posted it on Instagram. Tough times test us. Prayers needed. Stay strong, wife. #blessed wife. I later learned the nurses had started a betting pool on whether she'd show up again. One of them, a young guy named Steve who took care of me at night, told Liam, in 15 years of ICU nursing, I've never seen a spouse so uninvolved. Usually we have to force them to go home and rest. Day 3, I stabilized enough to be moved out of the ICU. Still incredibly sick, but no longer on death's doorstep. Serafina's response when Liam told her the news? Great. So he'll be home soon. No visit that day. Just a text, swamped at work. We'll try to swing by tomorrow. My parents arrived that evening. Drove 14 hours straight. Mom burst into tears when she saw me. Dad tried to stay strong but had to leave the room. They asked where Serafina was? Liam just shook his head. The next day, the infectious disease specialist figured it out. Necrotizing fasciitis. Strep throat gone rogue, eating away at the muscle in my right shoulder. That's why my arm wouldn't move. If Liam hadn't gotten me to the hospital when he did, I would have lost the arm, or died. Surgery was scheduled immediately. They needed next of kin to sign the consent forms. Liam had to explain that Serafina was unavailable. My parents signed. The surgeon's expression said it all. 3 hours later, I woke up in recovery. Liam, Mom, and Dad were there. Serafina? Sent flowers. Delivered by a service. Card. Get well soon. Miss you. Love. M. The nurses exchanged glances. I pretended not to notice. Day 5. Still weak as hell, but conscious. Starting to grasp how close I'd come. The antibiotics were working. Fever was down. I could manage brief conversations. My parents had gone back to Liam's place to rest, promised to be back for visiting hours. Serafina finally visited. Business casual outfit. Like she was heading to a power lunch, not to see her husband who had almost died. She sat by the window, scrolling through her phone, half listening while the doctor explained the extent of the damage. Muscle loss. Potential heart and kidney issues. Long course of antibiotics. Daily wound care. How long will all this take? She asked, finally looking up. I have that conference in Chicago next week. The one I told you about months ago. It's really important for my career. The doctor, to his credit, kept his face neutral. Mr. Hayes will need several weeks of recovery at home, followed by months of rehabilitation. He won't be able to work for at least 6 weeks, possibly longer. He'll need assistance with daily activities, wound care, and transportation to medical appointments. Serafina's face fell. But I have that conference. And the charity gala the week after. Damon, you know how important those are. The doctor looked at me, then back at her. Mrs. Hayes, your husband nearly died. His recovery needs to be the priority right now. After the doctor left, silence. Serafina went back to her phone, occasionally sighing like this was a personal affront. My mouth was dry. I tried to reach for the water. It was just out of reach. I was too weak to reach without dropping it. Serafina, could you hand me that water, please? She looked up, annoyed. Jesus, Damon, I'm not your nurse. Handle it yourself. You've got a call button right there. That was it. 6 years of marriage. And my wife had less compassion for me than the night janitor who emptied my trash, who asked how I was doing. Less concerned than the cafeteria worker who brought me extra Jell-O, because you need to keep your strength up, honey. I just nodded, stayed silent. What was there to say? The actual nurse, the one doing her job, helped me drink, checked my temperature, adjusted my pillows. All while Serafina watched TikTok videos with the volume up. Your brother's here, the nurse said, and I'd never been so relieved to see Liam walk through a door. He took one look at the situation, me struggling, Serafina oblivious, and his face hardened. Liam was usually easygoing, the family peacemaker, but in that moment, he looked ready to throw her phone out the window. I need to talk to you, he said to her, his voice tight. I don't know what he said in the hallway, but when they came back, she was quiet, subdued. She left shortly after, claiming she had a meeting. Liam stayed until visiting hours ended, helped me eat dinner, talked about nothing important. Bro, he said before leaving, his expression serious. I found something. You should know. Not the right time to tell you, but when you're stronger, we need to talk. How bad? I asked, already knowing from his face that it was going to hurt. He squeezed my good shoulder gently. Focus on getting better first. I've got your back. You know that, right? I nodded. He left. That night, for the first time since being admitted, I cried. Not from the pain, though there was plenty of that, but from the realization that the person who was supposed to love me the most couldn't even be bothered to hand me a cup of water. 12 days in that hospital, 12 days of clawing my way back. The infection had wrecked me. Lost over 20 pounds of muscle. Could barely walk to the bathroom without collapsing. Had to relearn basic motor skills. The physical therapist, a guy named Marcus, was a godsend. No BS. This is going to be hard, Damon. You were in great shape before, which probably saved your life. But you've got a mountain to climb to get back there. We started with simple exercises. Lifting my arm, squeezing a stress ball, standing up without getting dizzy. Humiliating, celebrating these tiny victories. But Marcus pushed me just enough. Your body's been through war, he explained. We need to respect that while challenging it to rebuild. Liam was there every day. My parents stayed at his place, visiting daily. My boss called, assured me my job was secure. My colleagues sent cards, food for my family, a tablet loaded with movies. Serafina visited 4 times. 4 times in 12 days. Each visit shorter, more irritated. She brought me clean clothes once, thrown in a plastic bag, not even folded. The last visit, she spent 20 minutes complaining that she'd had to reschedule her hair appointment because my mom asked her to pick up some medical supplies. I don't understand why your mom couldn't just order them online, she said, scrolling through her phone. It's not like I don't have my own life to deal with. I didn't respond. Focused on the exercises. The day before I was scheduled to be discharged, Liam finally told me what he'd discovered. He'd gone to the house to get more clothes. Needed my insurance information. Used Serafina's laptop. A message notification popped up on the screen. Can't wait for tonight. Bring that lingerie I like. From Jason, her gym trainer. Total cliché. Tribal tattoos. Tight shirts. Always talking about protein intake. Serafina had started working with him 8 months ago. Said she wanted to get more toned. Liam, being the protective brother, dug deeper. Hundreds of messages. Going back months. Pictures. Hotel receipts. Explicit conversations. Even meetups at our house. In our bed. There's more, Liam said quietly, his voice heavy. In some of the messages, she talks about you, says you're weak, too emotional, not man enough for her, that she needs a real man who doesn't bore her with talk about retirement accounts and budgets. He pulled out his phone, showed me screenshots. There it was, black and white. My wife complaining about me to her lover, making fun of how I'd gotten soft, saying she settled for financial stability but needed excitement elsewhere. But the worst part, the most recent messages were from when I was in the ICU. While I was fighting for my life, they were meeting at our house. In our bed. Sorry to hear about Damon, Jason had written. But since he's in the hospital, does that mean you're free tonight? Her response, definitely. Liam's staying there playing the protective brother, so the house is empty. Bring wine, I knew you needed to know, Liam said, putting his phone away. But I wanted to wait until you were stronger. There's more evidence at home. I took pictures of everything before she could delete it. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That would come later. In that moment, I felt clarity. The final piece of the puzzle. The complete ugly picture of my marriage. 6 years of excuses. 6 years of convincing myself that her coldness was normal. I need your help, I told Liam. I'm not going back to that house. He nodded. Already working on it. Mom and Dad are with me on this. We've got you. Later that night, the nurse came to check my vitals. You okay, honey? You look a little tense. Okay? My blood pressure is elevated. Just found out my wife has been cheating on me, I said, too exhausted to sugarcoat it. She patted my hand. While you've been in here, honey, that's not a wife. That's a placeholder until the right woman comes along. The plan came together fast. Serafina thought I was being discharged the next day. The doctors actually wanted me to stay one more night for observation. That gave us 24 hours. Liam called our buddy Steve, a lawyer. We played football together in high school. He'd gone on to become a pretty successful divorce attorney. Steve came to the hospital that night with paperwork. Power of attorney so Liam could handle my affairs. Documentation for the bank to secure my personal accounts. Preliminary divorce paperwork. Don't confront her yet, Steve advised, his expression serious. Not until you're stronger and have everything in order. She's shown you who she is. Believe her. I signed everything. My hand still shaky. Damon, I've seen a lot of divorce cases, Steve said before leaving. But this is cold, man. You deserve better. The next morning, while Serafina was supposedly at work, but according to her phone location, was actually at Jason's apartment. Yes, Liam had checked. Liam and our cousins, Tim and Eric, went to the house. They only took what was undeniably mine. Clothes, personal items, my grandfather's watch collection, my diplomas and awards, important documents. Liam set up a small apartment near his house. First floor, accessible bathroom, walking distance to a park for when I was strong enough. Mom stocked the kitchen with healthy foods. Dad set up the bedroom with an adjustable bed. Tim, who works in it, made sure I had a good internet connection and a laptop. Eric, who does construction, installed grab bars in the bathroom. When Serafina found out I'd been discharged to Liam's care instead of coming home, she was pissed. Not worried. Not concerned. Pissed. Why would you do that without telling me? I'm your wife. I had everything ready for you here. That was the first direct lie. Liam had been to the house. Nothing had been prepared. My side of the closet was full of her yoga gear. The guest room was still a disaster from the night I collapsed. The refrigerator contained 3 bottles of white wine, some yogurt, and takeout leftovers. Nothing for someone recovering from a major illness. I texted back a simple reply, I need time to get stronger. Staying with Liam for now. Her response was telling, is your family turning you against me? Not. Are you okay? Or what do you need? Just immediately assuming I was being manipulated. For 2 weeks, I focused only on recovering. Physical therapy in the mornings, protein-heavy meals, short walks that got longer each day, proper rest, medications, zero contact with Serafina, except for brief, factual texts. She swung between anger, you're being ridiculous. Just come home. Manipulation, I've been so worried about you. Don't you care how this affects me? People are asking questions. And fake concern for social media prayers for my husband's continued recovery. Blessed wife, #strongwife. Her Instagram told a very different story than reality. While I was learning how to do basic tasks again, she was posting about holding down the fort and taking care of everything while her man recovers. The reality, she hadn't even asked what medications I was on. Meanwhile, Liam had hired a PI. The PI documented multiple rendezvous between Serafina and Jason. Also found evidence of a second guy, one of the partners at her marketing firm. Apparently, I wasn't man enough for her, but she needed 2 replacements. Steve was building a rock-solid divorce case. Adultery doesn't automatically get you better terms in a divorce, but abandonment during a medical crisis, combined with misuse of marital funds she'd been buying her boyfriend's gifts with our joint account, definitely strengthened my position. By the end of those 2 weeks, I'd made significant progress. Could walk around the block, lift light weights with my good arm. The surgical wound was healing. And most importantly, my mind was clear. The day I finally felt strong enough, I called Serafina, asked to meet at a coffee shop near Liam's place, a public location for witnesses, in case she made a scene. And because I didn't trust myself to be alone with her in my apartment, Not because I'd hurt her, but because I wasn't sure I could stay strong if she turned on the waterworks. She showed up looking perfect, as always. Designer jeans, expensive blouse, hair and makeup flawless. But her eyes widened when she saw me. I was still thinner than usual, the surgical scar visible above the collar of my shirt. But I looked healthier, and my eyes were clear. No more brain fog, no more weakness, just clarity and purpose. "What is this dramatic exit about?" she demanded, sitting down across from me. "You nearly die and then decide to blow up our marriage? Are you having some kind of breakdown? Because this behavior is not normal, Damon." I studied her face. This woman I'd loved for 6 years. Who couldn't be bothered to help me drink water? Who'd invited another man into our bed while I was in the ICU? Without a word, I slid a folder across the table. Inside, the PI's photos, screenshots of text messages, hotel receipts, credit card statements showing gifts she'd bought for her boyfriends with our joint account. On top was a particularly damning text exchange from the day I'd gone into septic shock. Her face went white as she flipped through the evidence. I sat silently, letting her see it all. The secret credit card, the hotel charges, the texts mocking me, the conversations planning their meetups while I was hospitalized. "I know everything," I said calmly when she finally looked up. "I've filed for divorce. You'll be served tomorrow. Your stuff will be packed and moved to storage by the end of the week. The house is going on the market." Her face went through shock, anger, calculation, and finally, an attempt at seduction. She reached for my hand across the table. "Damon, baby, I made a mistake. I was stressed and scared with you being so sick. It didn't mean anything. We can work through this. Maybe see a counselor." I pulled my hand away. "You slept with another man in our bed while I was in the ICU with organ failure. Then you slept with your boss while complaining to your friends that I was milking my illness for attention. There's no working through that." She switched tactics instantly, her eyes hardening. "You've been so distant. Always at work or the gym. What was I supposed to do? You barely touched me for months. And then you get sick and expect me to be Florence Nightingale? I'm not built for that." "You're right," I said, standing up. "You're not built for it. That's why I'm leaving. The man you thought was too weak to leave you just did." I walked out, leaving her sitting there with the folder of evidence. Liam was waiting in the car outside. "How'd it go?" "Exactly as expected," I said. She tried excuses, then seduction, then blame shifting. Classic Serafina playbook. That night, the texts started. First pleading, then angry, then threatening. She'd been served the divorce papers that afternoon. According to Steve, she'd torn them up in front of the process server, as if that would make them invalid. "You can't do this to me," she wrote. I made one mistake. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The divorce was ugly, as expected. Serafina tried everything, claiming I was mentally unstable from the sepsis, that I'd been emotionally abusive, that I'd abandoned her. The judge wasn't impressed, especially when we submitted the hospital security footage showing her scrolling through Instagram while doctors explained my critical condition. The texts between her and her boyfriends were the final nail. I was awarded the majority of our assets. Serafina got stuck with my medical bills. Karma's first delivery. Meanwhile, Serafina's carefully constructed life was unraveling spectacularly. Her affair with Jason became public when his wife found out and went nuclear on social media, tagging their workplace, friends, and family. Turns out Jason was married the whole time. Serafina's marketing firm didn't appreciate the scandal, especially when they discovered she'd also been sleeping with one of the partners. She was asked to resign, lost the fancy title, the expense account, the status. Jason dumped her, of course, begged his wife for forgiveness, claimed Serafina had pursued him aggressively. The partner at her firm was already engaged to someone else and denied everything, claimed Serafina was unstable and making things up for attention. I watched it all unfold from a safe distance. I had moved on. About a year after our divorce, while my new girlfriend Sarah and I were moving into our new house, Liam called. "Damon, you won't believe this," he said. Serafina just got fired from her new job. Turns out she'd been bad-mouthing her boss to colleagues, not realizing the boss's assistant was within earshot. The same boss who'd taken a chance on her, despite the scandal at her previous job. Serafina was escorted out that day. With no job, mounting debt, a reputation in tatters, Serafina started reaching out to mutual friends, spinning a story about how she'd made a terrible mistake and wanted to apologize. I ignored it, too busy living my life with Sarah, planning a trip to Yellowstone, something I'd always wanted to do, but Serafina had vetoed because there weren't enough luxury hotels. Then the text started, first to Liam, then to my work email, then from unknown numbers. I miss you. I made the biggest mistake of my life. You were always the strong one. I see that now. Please, just coffee. Let me explain. I'm a different person now. I've grown. I'm in therapy and understanding my patterns. The last one made me laugh out loud. Ryan suggested I get a restraining order. I knew Serafina well enough to know that she'd eventually get bored. Her attention span was remarkably short. The text continued, morphing from saccharine apologies to desperate pleas, then finally into pathetic whines about how unfair life was. She'd lost her apartment, she claimed, was crashing on a friend's couch, couldn't find a job, and everyone was against her. I deleted each one without responding. Sarah, bless her practical heart, just rolled her eyes. She's exhausting, even secondhand. One evening, as Sarah and I were unpacking boxes in the living room, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering. Hello? A shaky voice on the other end. Damon? It's me, Serafina. I almost hung up. What do you want, Serafina? My voice was cold, harder than I intended. I need to talk to you. In person. We have nothing to talk about. Please, Damon. Just 5 minutes. I have something to tell you. Her voice cracked. I should have hung up. I knew it, but a tiny, insidious voice whispered in the back of my mind. Curiosity? Guilt? A flicker of something? Where? I asked, regretting it instantly. There's a park. The one near your old apartment. The one where we used to walk when we first started dating. Meet me there tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. The park. A place filled with ghosts of a happier past. A life that never truly existed. A trap. Fine, I said, but I'm only giving you 5 minutes. I ended the call before she could reply. Sarah gave me a withering look. Are you serious? After everything she did, you're actually going to meet her? I don't know, I admitted, running a hand through my hair. Maybe I just need closure. To hear what she has to say. To finally put this behind me. Closure? Damon, you had closure when the judge slammed that gavel. This is just going to be a drama fest. Don't do it. I knew she was right. But something compelled me. A need to understand. A need to forgive? God, I hated that I even considered it. The next evening, I drove to the park. It was a cool, crisp evening. The leaves were starting to turn, painting the landscape in shades of red and gold. The same park, but different. The memories felt distant, faded, like old photographs. I saw her sitting on a bench, near the fountain where we'd shared our first kiss. She looked different, thinner. Her hair wasn't as perfectly styled. No designer clothes. Just jeans and a simple sweater. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed. The sparkle was gone. I approached cautiously, like approaching a wounded animal. Serafina. She looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Damon, thank you for coming. I checked my watch. You have 5 minutes. She took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I know I hurt you. Terribly. And I don't expect you to forgive me. Not really, but I needed to tell you. I understand now. I understand what I did. And I'm truly sorry. Sorry doesn't cut it, Serafina. You nearly let me die. Her eyes filled with tears. I know. I was so selfish. so caught up in my own world. I wasn't there for you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. What do you want from me, Serafina? Why are you doing this now? I just wanted you to know. I wanted to tell you that you were right. About everything. About life, about us. I was so wrong. So blinded by what I thought was important. She paused, her voice trembling. And I wanted to tell you, I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Pregnant? What the hell? What? I stammered, completely blindsided. I'm pregnant, she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. With Jason's baby. My head was spinning. Of all the things I expected her to say, this was not it. Why are you telling me this? He left me. When he found out, said he didn't want to be a father, said I was a burden. She started to cry, the tears streaming down her face. Serafina, that's terrible. But what does this have to do with me? I don't know what to do, Damon. I have no money, no job, no family. I'm all alone. And I was hoping, maybe you could. The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. She wanted my help, after everything. She wanted me to bail her out. Absolutely not, I said, my voice rising. Are you out of your mind? You destroyed my life, Serafina. You cheated on me. You abandoned me when I was at my lowest, and now you expect me to help you raise another man's baby? You have got to be kidding me. I know I don't deserve it, she sobbed. But I'm desperate, Damon. Please, think of the baby. I'm not responsible for your choices, Serafina. You made your bed. Now you have to lie in it. I turned to leave, my heart pounding. Damon, please. Don't leave me. She reached for me, grabbing my arm. I pulled away, disgusted. Stay away from me, Serafina. If you ever contact me again, I'm getting a restraining order. I walked away, leaving her sobbing on the bench. I didn't look back. The drive home was a blur. I was shaking with anger and disbelief. The audacity of her, expecting me to help her after what she'd done. Sarah was waiting for me at the house, her arms crossed. Well, I told her everything. About the meeting, about the pregnancy, about Serafina's desperate plea. Sarah listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she took my hand. I'm so sorry, Damon. That's awful. I don't know what to do, I confessed, feeling lost and confused. Part of me wants to help her, but I know I shouldn't. I can't. Not after everything. Sarah squeezed my hand. You don't owe her anything, Damon. She made her choices, and she has to live with the consequences. But the baby, that's not your responsibility. There are resources for pregnant women in need. She can reach out to them, but you don't have to sacrifice your own happiness to save her. Her words were a balm to my soul. I knew she was right. I couldn't let Serafina drag me back into her toxic world. I had to protect myself. Protect Sarah. Protect the life we were building together. Over the next few weeks, I tried to put Serafina out of my mind. I focused on work, on my relationship with Sarah, on our plans for the future. But the thought of her, alone and pregnant, haunted me. One day, I was scrolling through the local news website and saw an article about a new program for struggling single mothers. It provided housing, job training, and childcare assistance. It was exactly what Serafina needed. I hesitated, then clicked on the share button and sent the link to her old email address. I didn't write a message, just the link. I never heard from her again. Years passed. Sarah and I got married. We bought a bigger house, adopted a rescue dog, traveled the world. My career flourished. My physical and mental health improved. I finally felt like I was living a life that was true to myself. One afternoon, I was volunteering at a local soup kitchen when I saw a familiar face. A woman with blonde hair pushing a stroller. Her face was lined and worn, but I recognized her instantly. Serafina. I froze, my heart pounding. What should I do? Should I approach her? Should I pretend I didn't see her? She looked up, our eyes met. For a moment, there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Then she looked away, her face flushing. She quickly turned and walked in the other direction, pushing the stroller faster. I watched her go, a wave of conflicting emotions washing over me. Pity, relief, sadness, and, yes, a tiny bit of forgiveness. I didn't approach her. I didn't say anything. I just let her go. Maybe someday I would be able to truly forgive her, but not today. Today, I was content with letting her live her own life, separate from mine. I turned back to the task at hand, serving food to the hungry. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about letting go of the anger and resentment. It was about choosing to move forward, to build a better future for myself and for those around me. The ghosts of the past would always be there, but they no longer had the power to haunt me. I had finally found peace. I had survived, and I was stronger than ever. The encounter at the soup kitchen lingered in my mind for weeks. It wasn't a haunting exactly, more like a persistent echo. I'd catch myself thinking about Serafina, wondering how she was doing, if she'd managed to turn her life around. I fought against it, reminding myself of all the pain she'd caused, the betrayal, the near-death experience that she'd treated as a mere inconvenience. But still, the questions gnawed. Sarah, perceptive as always, noticed my distraction. One evening, as we were curled up on the couch, watching a movie, she gently nudged me. "You're still thinking about her, aren't you?" I sighed. "Yeah, I can't help it." Seeing her, it brought everything back. "Do you regret not saying something?" "I don't know. Part of me thinks I should have offered some kind of support. But then I remember everything she did and I just can't." Sarah took my hand. "You're a good person, Damon. You have a big heart, but you can't fix everyone, especially not someone who's so resistant to change." "I know," I said, "but what if she really is trying? What if she's really changed?" Sarah squeezed my hand. "Then she'll find a way to make it on her own. Without you." Her words were harsh, but they were true. Serafina had to take responsibility for her own life. I couldn't be her savior, her rescuer. I had my own life to live, my own happiness to protect. A few weeks later, I received an invitation in the mail. It was a charity gala, benefiting the same program for struggling single mothers that I'd sent to Serafina. The invitation came from a local organization that Sarah and I had supported in the past. I almost threw it away. The thought of attending a gala filled with wealthy socialites, all dressed to the nines, made me uneasy. It felt like stepping back into Serafina's world, a world of superficiality and empty gestures. But then I thought about the women the program was helping. The women like Serafina, who were trying to rebuild their lives, to provide for their children. Maybe, just maybe, attending the gala could make a difference. I showed the invitation to Sarah. "What do you think? Should we go?" She raised an eyebrow. "To a charity gala? You? I thought you hated those things." "I do," I admitted. "But this one, it's for a good cause. And I'm curious. I want to see what this program is all about." Sarah smiled. "Then let's go. But you have to promise me you won't spend the whole night brooding about Serafina." I laughed. "I promise." The night of the gala arrived. I reluctantly donned a tuxedo, feeling stiff and uncomfortable. Sarah, on the other hand, looked radiant in a simple, elegant dress. She had a way of making even the most pretentious events feel genuine. The ballroom was crowded, filled with the usual suspects, wealthy donors, local politicians, social media influencers. The air buzzed with polite conversation and clinking champagne glasses. It felt exactly as I'd expected, superficial and loud. Sarah and I circulated, making small talk, nodding politely to people we didn't know. I scanned the room, half expecting to see Serafina, but she was nowhere in sight. Later in the evening, the program director took the stage. She was a passionate, articulate woman who spoke eloquently about the challenges faced by single mothers and the importance of providing them with the resources they needed to succeed. She shared stories of women who had overcome incredible obstacles, who had transformed their lives with the help of the program. As I listened, I felt a shift in my perspective. It wasn't just about Serafina anymore. It was about all the women who were struggling, who were fighting to create a better future for themselves and their children. It was about giving them a chance, a helping hand, a reason to believe. After the program director finished speaking, a woman took the stage to share her own story. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, with a shy smile and a hesitant voice. As she began to speak, I realized that I recognized her. It was one of the women I'd served food to at the soup kitchen, the woman I'd seen with Serafina. She told her story with raw honesty, describing the abuse she'd suffered, the poverty she'd endured, the desperation she'd felt when she realized she was pregnant and alone. She talked about how the program had given her a safe place to live, a chance to learn new skills, and the support she needed to raise her child. "I don't know where I'd be without this program," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "It saved my life, and it gave my daughter a chance to have a good life, a life filled with love and hope." As she spoke, I noticed Serafina standing near the back of the room. She was holding her baby, rocking her gently. She was listening intently to the woman's story, her eyes filled with tears. After the woman finished speaking, the program director announced that they would be holding a silent auction to raise money for the program. The auction items included vacation packages, artwork, and signed sports memorabilia. Sarah and I browsed the auction tables, looking for something to bid on. I noticed that there was a framed photograph of a local landmark, a beautiful sunset scene. It was simple but striking. I turned to Sarah. "What do you think? Should we bid on this?" Sarah smiled. "I love it. Let's do it." We filled out a bid sheet, writing down our maximum bid. Then, we continued to mingle, enjoying the rest of the evening. As the auction was coming to a close, I checked on our bid. It had been outbid. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to raise our bid. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked. "It's getting pretty expensive, I'm sure," I said. "I really want that picture." We waited anxiously as the final bids were tallied. Then the program director announced the winner. And the winner of the framed photograph is Damon Hayes. Sarah and I smiled at each other. We went up to the stage to claim our prize. As I was signing the paperwork, I noticed Serafina standing nearby. She was holding her baby, looking at me with a hesitant expression. "Damon," she said softly. I turned to her. "Serafina." She smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "Thank you," she said, "for supporting this program. It's really helping me." I nodded. "I'm glad to hear that." She looked down at her baby, her eyes filled with love. "I'm trying, Damon. I'm really trying to be a better person, to be a good mother." "I know you are," I said. And for the first time, I truly believed it. She looked up at me again, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she repeated. "For everything." I smiled. "You're welcome, Serafina." We stood there for a moment, in silence. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I watched her go, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The past was still there, but it no longer had the power to control me. I had finally found a way to forgive, not just Serafina, but myself. I turned to Sarah, taking her hand. "Let's go home," I said. She smiled. "Let's go." As we drove home, I thought about the photograph we'd won, the sunset scene. A reminder that even after the darkest of nights, there's always the promise of a new dawn. A reminder that second chances are possible. And sometimes, the greatest act of revenge is simply living a good life. We hung the photograph in our living room, where we could see it every day. It became a symbol of our journey, a reminder of the pain we'd overcome, and the love we'd found. And though I never spoke to Serafina again, I knew that she was out there, fighting her own battles, trying to create a better life for herself and her child. And I wished her well, because in the end, that's all that truly matters. Not revenge, not bitterness, not holding on to the past, but forgiveness, compassion, and the courage to create a new future. A future filled with love, hope, and the promise of a beautiful sunset. The price of my forgiveness wasn't about erasing what happened. It was about choosing to build something better from the ashes. And that, I finally understood, was the most brutal revenge of all. Years continued to drift by, Like leaves on a slow-moving river, Sarah and I built a life filled with love, laughter, and shared dreams. We traveled, volunteered, and supported each other through thick and thin. My career continued to flourish, and I found fulfillment in mentoring young analysts, sharing the lessons I'd learned along the way. The photograph of the sunset remained a fixture in our living room, a silent testament to the journey we'd taken. It wasn't a constant reminder of the pain, but rather a symbol of the resilience of the human spirit, the power of forgiveness, and the unwavering strength of our bond. I rarely thought about Serafina anymore. She'd become a distant memory, a faded photograph in the album of my past. But every now and then, a news article, a chance encounter, or a fleeting thought would bring her back to the surface. One day, I was browsing through a local online forum when I stumbled upon a thread discussing the achievements of local single mothers. One post in particular caught my eye. It was a glowing tribute to a woman named Serafina Hayes, who had overcome incredible odds to build a successful business while raising her daughter. The post detailed her struggles with addiction, poverty, and the challenges of being a single parent. It praised her resilience, her determination, and her unwavering commitment to her daughter. The post went on to describe how Serafina had started a small online boutique selling handcrafted jewelry. Her business had quickly grown, thanks to her talent, hard work, and dedication to quality. She was now employing several other single mothers, providing them with a living wage and a chance to rebuild their lives. The post concluded with a heartfelt message of gratitude to the community for its support and a call to action for others to help those in need. As I read the post, I felt a surge of conflicting emotions: pride, disbelief, and a strange sense of completion. Serafina had done it. She had turned her life around. She had become the person I always hoped she could be. I clicked on the link to her online boutique. The jewelry was beautiful, unique, and clearly made with love. I scrolled through the customer reviews, and they were overwhelmingly positive. People praised the quality of the jewelry, the excellent customer service, and the inspiring story behind the business. I spent hours browsing through her website, reading her story, and admiring her creations. I felt a profound sense of respect for her, for the woman she had become. I didn't reach out to her. I didn't send her a message. I simply closed the laptop and walked away. But as I went about my day, I found myself smiling. Serafina had found her own path to redemption. She had created a life that was meaningful, fulfilling, and inspiring to others. And that in itself was a victory. That evening, as Sarah and I sat down for dinner, I shared the story with her. She listened intently, her eyes filled with compassion. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "That's amazing, Damon," she said. "I'm so proud of her. And I'm so proud of you for being able to see the good in her, even after everything she did." I smiled. "It took me a long time to get here," I said. "But I finally understand. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about letting go. It's about choosing to see the best in others, even when they don't deserve it. It's about creating a world filled with compassion, understanding, and hope." Sarah squeezed my hand. "You're a remarkable man, Damon Hayes," she said. "And I'm so lucky to have you in my life." We finished our dinner in comfortable silence, our hearts filled with gratitude. Later that night, as I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, I realized that I had finally found true peace. The past was no longer a burden, but a lesson, a reminder of the strength I had found within myself, the love that had sustained me, and the power of forgiveness to heal even the deepest wounds. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that I could finally say, with complete honesty, that I had forgiven Serafina. Not for her sake, but for my own. Because in the end, the greatest act of revenge is not to seek retribution, but to find healing, to embrace compassion, and to create a life filled with love and purpose. The price of my forgiveness had been steep, but the rewards were immeasurable. I had traded bitterness for peace, anger for understanding, and revenge for a life truly worth living. And that, I realized, was a victory worth celebrating.